Hello everyone, so recently I've been experimenting with weapons and wondered, are special attacks worth using on Evolution of Combat in comparison to Legacy? Special attacks come from specific weapons which have unique abilities different amongst each other that can be distinguished by their appearance and special animation. There are several weapons that have a special attack, such as an Abyssal Whip, Magic Short Bow, and Staff of Light, but not all weapons have them. On Evolution of Combat, special attacks require adrenaline to use and the special attack ability, while Legacy requires special attack energy. Difference between the two is one uses an adrenaline bar and the other uses a special attack energy meter. The special attack meter on Legacy takes about 5 minutes to restore from 0% to 100%, which is 20% special energy per minute. Building adrenaline to 100% on Evolution of Combat takes approximately 22 to 24 seconds depending if using abilities manually or on Revolution. This means special attacks can be used roughly 12 times within the time taken to recover special energy on Legacy. While special attacks on Evolution of Combat can be used 12 more times than on Legacy, the damage from specials on Evolution of Combat is halved to compensate the amount of uses. Despite damage being halved on Evolution of Combat, the amount of special attacks being used may very well even out with Legacy or possibly outdamage in comparison. There are currently a total of 60 different weapons that have a special attack, and I will be going over a few of them to compare with using on Evolution of Combat and Legacy. For the test, I used Dwarven Challenge Barrels to calculate the damage per minute using special attacks with various weapons on Evolution of Combat and Legacy to compare the difference between the two systems. Dwarven Challenge Barrels last 3 minutes each, so the test was based on this time interval, but ideally the test would fit for 5 minutes since this is how long special attack energy recovers on Legacy. In order to calculate damage for special attacks on Evolution of Combat and Legacy on a 5-minute interval would require 5 Dwarven Challenge Barrels to be used for each combat system. Rather than using 5 barrels for each combat system in total of 10, I used 1 Dwarven barrel for each combat system in a total of 2 each and the weapon of choice for ease in calculation. The weapon used in the test was Dragon Daggers, Dragon Longswords, Dragon Maces, Armadyl Godsword, Hand Cannon, Dark Bow, Ivan Staff, and Armadyl Battle Staff. Although this is not using every special attack weapon available, I've picked a few to represent each style of combat, being melee, range, and magic. At least 2 weapons were used for each combat style along with 2 barrels for each weapon in that combat system. In the test using dual-wield Dragon Daggers on Evolution of Combat with a Dwarven Barrel, I managed to deal 39.2 thousand damage per minute, while on Legacy, I managed to deal 33.5 thousand damage per minute. During the test with special attacks on Evolution of Combat, I used a 4 ability rotation bar on Revolution to keep things simple, and a special attack for the weapon whenever the required adrenaline had been reached. No thresholds or ultimate abilities were used to make calculations fair. Keep in mind this is not calculating the best damage per second with abilities, but to compare special attacks on Evolution of Combat and Legacy. Special attacks used on Legacy was only limited to 100% meter to keep things fair, and no further specials were used as the energy had been recovering. The difference in damage between the two combat systems was 5.7 thousand more damage had been dealt on Evolution of Combat than Legacy, which shows having more uses with specials can factor significantly in the long run in terms of damage. In the test using dual-wield Dragon Longswords with a Dwarven Barrel, I was able to deal 35.5 thousand damage per minute on Evolution of Combat, and on Legacy, I dealt 32.9 thousand damage per minute. The difference in damage between the two combat systems was 2.6 thousand more damage dealt on Evolution of Combat than Legacy. This time, the difference is much closer, but damage from specials on Evolution of Combat is slightly higher. Now let's suppose we use special attacks on Legacy as the special energy is recovering. Would this increase the damage output further? From a test using Dragon Maces, I managed to deal 33.1 thousand damage per minute using 4 specials and 31.5 thousand damage per minute using 6 specials. Both tests were done over a 3-minute period with the Dwarven Barrel. Judging by the results, the damage from using more specials had been lower than using fewer specials, though what could have attributed to this? The cause in less damage using more specials may be from the slow attack animation to execute or quite possibly a random number generator. Dragon Mace special attack can deal anywhere from 100% to 300% weapon damage, which means hitting low rolls compared to maximum is more than likely. On the other hand, the tests using Dragon Maces on Evolution of Combat, I managed to deal 34.2 thousand damage per minute. The difference is even closer than before by 1.1 thousand more damage on Evolution of Combat, but a small amount can add over time in terms of damage. The next weapon tested with was Armadyl Godsword, in which I was able to deal 41.7 thousand damage per minute using Evolution of Combat, and on Legacy I dealt 40,000 damage per minute. In this sample, the difference was 1.7 thousand more damage had been dealt on Evolution of Combat in comparison to Legacy, thus shows using more special attacks over time can deal more damage. Moving on to the next weapon tested with was a hand cannon. I managed to deal 31.8 thousand damage per minute on Evolution of Combat, while on Legacy I was able to deal 38.9 thousand damage per minute. This time the difference is by 7.1 thousand more damage had been dealt on Legacy in comparison to Evolution of Combat. Now the question is, why did hand cannon deal less damage on Evolution of Combat instead of Legacy? Generally, when using the same weapons on Evolution of Combat or Legacy, the damage output is about on par with each other. However, the attack speed from the hand cannon on Legacy is much slower, but is compensated by having higher attack auto damage in contrast to using abilities on Evolution of Combat, which is faster. The next range weapon tested with was a dark bow, where I dealt 31.3 thousand damage in 1 minute on Evolution of Combat, whereas on Legacy I dealt 27.8 thousand damage per minute. Between the two combat systems, the difference was 3.5 thousand more damage had been dealt on Evolution of Combat in comparison to Legacy. Unlike the hand cannon, dark bow damage is less due to being a shield bow even though the weapon is two-handed. Shield bow weapons have 100% damage, which is that of a main hand instead of 150% damage of a two-handed weapon. Since the damage on Evolution of Combat was higher with dark bow using special attacks, this means usage of more specials can deal more damage over time. The next weapon tested with was Ivan Staff, where I was able to deal 35.7 thousand damage per minute, whereas on Legacy I dealt 26.6 thousand damage per minute. The difference between the two was by 9.1 thousand more damage had been dealt on Evolution of Combat in comparison to Legacy, which means using special attacks on Evolution of Combat by far outdamages Legacy. Following on to the next weapon to test is Armadyl Battle Staff. I managed to deal 46.4 thousand damage per minute on Evolution of Combat, and on Legacy I managed to deal 37.3 thousand damage per minute. The difference between the two combat systems was by 9,000 more damage on Evolution of Combat in comparison to Legacy. Similarly, like Ivan Staff, Armadyl Battle Staff special attacks on Evolution of Combat outdamages Legacy. Based on the tested results with using special attacks on Evolution of Combat in comparison to Legacy, we can confirm more uses with specials will deal more damage overall. The difference may vary depending on which weapon used, but damage over time is more likely to be greater in Evolution of Combat than Legacy. While analyzing the subject at hand, what if we use threshold abilities to compare with special attacks? From using Dragon Daggers with 3 threshold abilities, I was able to deal 47.8 thousand damage per minute. When comparing Legacy combat special attacks, then the difference is 14.3 thousand more damage on Evolution of Combat. Following this test was range for hand cannon with 3 threshold abilities. I was able to deal 49.5 thousand damage per minute. Again, if we compare this to Legacy special attacks, then the difference is by 10.5 thousand more damage on Evolution of Combat. Last, in the test with magic, using Armadyl Battle Staff with 3 threshold abilities, I was able to deal 51.3 thousand damage within 1 minute. Comparing the number with Legacy special attacks, the difference is by 14,000 more damage on Evolution of Combat. Looking at the results, threshold abilities have a much greater output damage in contrast to Legacy special attacks. From what we know, using threshold abilities is better overall in terms of damage per second. So in which case scenario will using special attacks on Evolution of Combat become better than using thresholds or ultimate abilities? For example, when using a Ceradoman Godsoul special for immediate healing versus the passive effect, the special heals more in comparison, which can be very useful at places such as Fight Kiln and Fight Caves. If a player does not have access to Enhanced Excalibur, a Beast of Burden, a Healing Familiar, or Soul Split, then the Ceradoman Godsoul can be another alternative. At lower level combat, if the player cannot use every threshold ability available, then using special attacks can be another choice. Let's say a player is training their combat stats on Ape Atoll Gorillas but only has 52 strength and 60 attack using dual-wield dragon daggers. Typically, when using dual-wield weapons, the thresholds most commonly used are Assault and Destroy, but since the player does not have access to Assault, which requires level 55 strength, they cannot alternate between the two abilities. The other option to use can be Dragon Dagger Special Attack instead and alongside Destroy Threshold ability in this scenario. Depending on the situation, special attacks can prove beneficial. Although, at higher levels, when more abilities are unlocked, then special attacks are used less often or rarely at all. Thresholds require at least 50% adrenaline to use while draining 15 upon usage, and compared to special attacks requiring anywhere from 10% to 100% drain can be more wasteful. If we compare, say, using the threshold ability Assault to the Armadyl Godsoul special attack, with Assault dealing 219% weapon damage hitting 4 times, whereas Armadyl Godsoul special deals 250% weapon damage hitting 1 time, then Assault is the better choice overall. Armadyl Godsoul special may have a higher initial weapon damage hit of 250% versus 219% from Assault. However, Assault can hit 4 times, dealing up to 219% each hit for up to 876% in total, meaning the cost ratio in terms of adrenaline loss is more preferable towards using threshold abilities over special attacks. Since Legacy has no access to abilities, then special attacks have a more general use, but on the other hand, Evolution of Combat has more accessibility with abilities other than special attacks, which gives much more variety. Whether or not someone uses Evolution of Combat or Legacy is personal preference, as each style has their own benefits. Overall, special attack weapons on Evolution of Combat are nice to have, but the use of them is very situational in comparison to Legacy. Special attacks definitely have their own benefits at times, especially when at lower level combat, but tend to be used less often at higher combat due to better ways to manage adrenaline with thresholds and ultimate abilities. Prior to the Evolution of Combat, special attacks was a fantastic asset to the game. However, now there are better weapons available and special attacks have become a memory of the past. So that concludes my analysis on special attack weapons. If there are any questions or thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Also, let me know what your favorite special attack weapon on RuneScape is. And as always, thanks for watching and have an awesome day.